Welcome, welcome. I see a few faces that I know very well. Good to see you. Uh, so I want to quickly introduce myself and my co-host today. My name is Melanie Taylor. I am the Director of Education and Operations here at Eat, Breathe, Thrive, and very excited to be with you. It's been a while. It's been a few months since we were together. And Jason's with me today. Jason, do you want to take a moment and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone. I am Jason Wood. I am the marketing and communications manager at Anid. I also facilitate our men's support group, and I am really looking forward to the opportunity to join Melanie today and to join all of you for this yoga and recovery chat.
So wonderful to have you here. Jason and I just got to know each other a little while ago. We were just chatting a bit before the call about what's changing in our own organization and some of the things we've been through and the change of seasonality around our work. And so we kind of like, it was interesting. I was thinking about that. I was like, well, what's our opening question? We were kind of starting this conversation ourselves, just so
Yeah.
great. So I want to start with a bit of that icebreaker question and if you want to add this into the chat box, thinking about this question, and that question is, what's one thing that is challenging, and what's one thing that's exciting about change? So, what's one thing that's challenging, and one thing that's exciting about change? So, Jason, why don't I put that question to you while everybody has an opportunity to answer that?
hmm Yeah, so immediately for me, the challenging part stands out because change is scary. I like to have my routines and I like to have a set schedule, a set way of doing things. And when change comes about, it can often be scary because it's the unknown. You don't know what to expect. But at the same time, that can be exciting, especially if you're in a moment where you're looking for a change. I mean, so often we run from change, but sometimes we're like, "Ooh, I wish I could change something." So there is that exciting aspect of it too, because you never know what could happen. I know one thing for me was coming over and deciding to share my story and to get involved with Anid. That was a big change for me, but it has been super exciting because now I've got to meet people like you, Melanie, and all the people that are joining us today. It's just that's one of the exciting things that can come with change as well.
Yeah, no, it's interesting too. Like even in what we were just saying, and I've got some people that have just joined in, so I'm going to restate that question. So you can put your answer right on the chat box there. What is one thing that is challenging, and what's one thing that's exciting about change? And you're just saying this recognition, right? Like it's kind of there's sort of both in all of it. Change can be very uncertain, very unsettling. It can mess with our um patterns, and that could be a good thing and that can be a really challenging thing. So always that looking at the fact that there's typically a bit of both in there. They can be scary, they can be unsettling, it can be kind of disrupting, well also it can be an opportunity for something new, can like turn into something really lovely, like us getting to meet, which is really really great. And I see
Yeah.
in the chat box here, one of the comments is, change for me is exciting, that it serves as a reminder that I get to start again, that I'm not stuck in this season. Ooh, love
Which
that.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me that's so exciting is to always be able to start again. And that's one of the things that I found in my own recovery journey is that yeah, I might have a tough day, but I always get to start again. There's always the next day where I get to try over again. And I thinking about the season part of that. I love having all four seasons. I lived in the South for a while where it was super hot all the time, and I didn't really have the seasons anymore. So I get excited now living in the Midwest again and having the four seasons on the calendar. And I think the same goes for life. Like it's always nice to have the seasons to know that change is possible.
Yeah. No, I love that. It's another person's commented, change is very unnerving when I anticipate it, but when it happens, I embrace it and realize it was not necessary to stress over. Oh, you just hit the nail right on the head there. I think it's so easy for what that uncertainty of it, what we don't know, to cause us all kinds of duress, all kinds of stress, etc. Well, I wanted to just pause for a moment and give everybody a few logistical reminders before we get too much further in this conversation. And so keep throwing your answers into the chat box there. Um, so the event is being recorded, as you know, and Jason and I are the only ones we're spotlighted. So unless you come on audio, that's the only way you'll be captured. Only your voice, not your video. So you can feel free if you want to put your virtual hand up. If you want to share openly with the group, that's fine. We'll capture your audio, but not your video. And the recording sometime this week will be put up on the Eat, Breathe, Thrive YouTube channel. I know Anna will be sharing that as well, and you'll get an email tomorrow or the day after with links to that recording and where to find it. A quick reminder of our community guidelines. You already read through those in your registration, and that we invite you to be part of the conversation, ask questions, um, share, and be part of the conversation. And so our opening conversation question today, again, is what is one thing that is challenging and what is one thing that's exciting about change, which is really our topic today, is navigating change and transitions, and how, really we've been talking about that. It can be such a challenging disruptor that causes a lot of suffering to begin with, as we're like looking forward of what it's going to be like. And then once we get in it, and exciting, a little bit fun or something new, and all of that. So Jason, what's a big change that you've gone through recently? You mentioned moving onto the ANAD team.
Mhm.
How did you support yourself through that change?
Yeah, so that was a big change for me because it was one of those things where not only was I changing careers, but I was also just changing my vulnerability. I was going from someone who had kept so many things to myself for so long, and suddenly I was putting myself out there. So I was not just changing careers, but I was changing kind of the way that I've communicated with other folks for a long time. And one of the things that was so important for me throughout that entire journey was to practice that self-care and to try to remain as positive as I could throughout it, knowing that it might be uncomfortable at times, but at the end of the day, it's going to totally feel worth it. And that's exactly kind of what got me through it, was that feeling of just making it one day at a time through the change. I wasn't thinking 6 months in advance. I wasn't thinking a year in advance. You know how you go for a job interview and they're like, where do you see yourselves in 5 years? Nope. I was focused on like the next 5 minutes. And that's kind of how I was able to navigate that change and to get through some of that discomfort in the early stages.
I love that. I think our society has a lot of like productivity pressure of like, where are you going to be? What's your plan? What are your goals? All of that stuff. And it brings us out of the present moment. I love how you said that. What's the next 5 minutes going to look like? How am I caring for myself now with self-compassion? And you didn't say it, but there's empathy there, right?
Hmm.
I'm terrible at that when it comes to self-empathy. It's something I'm so good at giving to another person, but when it comes to me, I get caught in that little self spiral, and have to bring myself back and actively engage in the practice of self-care and empathy.
Right. Yeah, it's one of those things. One of my favorite memes out there is that you should love yourself the way that your dog loves you. And it's so true because that's
Oh,
what I struggle with all the time, is that I can love everybody else, but it's always much more difficult for me to love myself. So when I start getting hard on myself, I look at my dog and I'm like, okay, they love me. Like I can love me too. So yeah, that kind of helps me. I don't know what helps you, Melanie, when it comes to that self-love and self-empathy.
I love that. I grew up having dogs. We have cats at the moment. I grew up having dogs. But I'm going to stick with dogs because I think cats can be a little snarkier. Like just that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, all of these things about how do we support ourselves in this transition, whether it's change, transition, or just the day to day, is always going to come back to that self compassion, seeing ourselves like we would see someone else. Commonly say, like, what would you, if this was your friend, what would you say, what would you do, what would you offer? and this opportunity to really listen into how much easier it is to have self-compassion for another human being, because we're not in their head. We're not listening to all of that. We call it the monkey mind, right? All that chatter that can be, I mean, truly, it's not the most kind voice. It's always a little fear-based and really challenging who we are and who do we think we are and what we're capable of. So it's easy to have that for someone else because we're not listening to the same messages for them.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things too that often helps me when it comes to change is that I will remember that I tried. And to me, that helps me when it comes to the self-love too, because nobody likes to fail. Nobody likes to say, hey, this didn't go the way that I thought it was going to go, or it didn't turn out as good as I thought it was. But that's okay with change, is that you at least gave it a try, you gave it a go, and be proud of that. And to me, that is another act of that self-compassion and that self-love, is just not being too hard on myself sometimes if things don't go according to plan.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and there's part of that too, of there's the opportunity to acknowledge that, we all get out of bed in the morning. I try to think about this, whether it's my actions or someone else's. We all get out of bed in the morning, and I don't think any of us wake up and be like, I'm going to just not have a good day. I'm going to hurt people today. I'm not going to be my best self. Like, we don't get out of bed that way. We get with best intentions for our day. And it doesn't mean we get to follow through on those best intentions, but that's how we wake up. We wake up with a certain intent. And to recognize that whatever the result is, that we got up and we did our best that day. I think we do. I think most of us, most of the time, are literally just doing our best. What's available to us in that moment, what's accessible to us in that moment. And so that's, what you're saying here, this tying that back into, I tried, whatever the result is, I got up, I did it, I gave my effort, and the result is just the result, versus being attached to effort meaning something about how far we get, right?
Hmm. I love
Yeah.
that. Just the result. That's going to be my tagline for the week. I like that right there. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
one of the things that I found over the years is that it's helpful when I write my story out and then I read it back to myself from like a third party point of view, because I'm reading my own story and my own experience from an outsider perspective. And I always found that way I'm able to better identify what's going on in the journey. I'm better to able forgive the person in the story if they do trip up or make a mistake. So that always helps me too. Is I like to call it the objective perspective that I take on my own situation.
I love that. The objective perspective. That's really fun. And I love
Yeah.
the sense of journaling. I'm sure that there's a few of you that are with us today, like writing and journaling. It might be you take it to art in some way. Each of us have a way of expressing, and could we look at that expression with that objective perspective? I love that. I'd love to hear a bit from the group, and so you can put your hand up and speak out loud, or use the chat box. What are some changes that are coming up for you or that you're experiencing right now? So what are some changes that you're experiencing right now or that are coming up for you? And so I'm coming into our new cohort season. I am a yoga teacher trainer. And so every September we start with a new group. And I've been teaching for a really, really long time. And I always find August so interesting because it's like new students, somebody like, am I going to hold the right amount of space for them? Am I going to connect with them in the same way? And no matter how many times I do it, there's always this like anxiety that I'm experiencing about it. That it's like the an hour into the first class, I'm like, oh yeah, that was silly. Like, there I was again, being a human being, doing these human things, like being anxious about something. What's coming up for you, Jason? What's coming up new for you?
Yeah, so well, right off the bat, I was thinking about heading into our chat today, and I'm like, this is something completely new. I'm used to getting on, and I'll share my story, I'll speak about it, but I've never done a yoga and recovery chat before. So this was something new, and there was a little bit of anxiety heading into it. And yeah, 2 minutes into it, I'm like, what was that all about? Like, that I am just a human doing human things. So just today alone, I'm experiencing that newness, but it's getting ready for me to go out on the speaking scene again. I speak to a lot of college and university students out there. And now that I've not done it in a couple months, there is that anxiety that comes up as I prepare to put myself out there again and to start having some of those uncomfortable conversations at times. But it's just another change in the seasons, and I know as soon as I get back out there and shake off the rust, it will feel great again. But yeah, there's always those changes.
Yeah, it's oh, you said it so well, right? Like it's just you shake off the rust. I love that. Just this opportunity with I think once we settle into it, once we're actually experiencing it versus that mind chatter of like what's coming and all the questions. When I was young, I worked at Blockbuster Video, and I remember this is going to age me quite a bit. But all the VHS would come back, and we'd like stick it in the little rewinding machine and pop it down, and it would rewind it for us so that the next person could watch from the beginning. And that's kind of how our mind is, right? It's like always in rewind or fast forward.
Right.
It's like trying to go back to yesterday or replay tomorrow. But when we're in the actual moment with actual people engaging in our lives, all that stuff kind of quiets because we're so focused. I mean, our mind, as much as we think it's a multitasker, it's kind of not. It's not really great at multitasking. Yeah. Go ahead, Susie.
Yeah, hi. I interesting that you said Blockbuster Video, because I've rented many in my day. And your analogy made me think speaking of the rewind feature, it's like I always forget when I start to get anxious about change and I start to get anxious about the unknown and not being able to control all the pieces that are happening because I don't know what the pieces are going to be and so on, is maybe I just keep rewinding and forgetting that I've changed. I've grown. I have, I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago, 2 years ago, even 1 year ago. And I sometimes rewind to thinking I'm the same person when I'm really not. And I have grown, and I forget to give myself credit for that. That doesn't mean I'm not still like messing up and falling back, but it does mean that I have learned, I have grown. And sometimes I make choices that seem out of alignment with my goals, but I had one recently, but there was like an underlying goal that needed that choice. So yeah, but I just think also noticing, remembering what we have done, what I have done, how I have grown, and not forgetting that, and to know that there's still, yes, I'm still growing, but yes, I've also made progress. Yes, I've also made changes.
Thank you, Susie. How beautiful. I hear a lot of self-compassion and acknowledgement in what you're saying. And I think, the way our brain even works is we don't always have access to all that linear thinking, right? Like I've been here before, I've been able to get through this before. Look at all the changes that I've made. Look at how far I've come. Like all of that part kind of goes away. Like we think about the past and tomorrow a lot more in a worry state, but there's lots of like remembering our resilience, remembering that we've tackled similar challenges or changes before, and that we're here. So if we're here, it automatically we can make an assumption we've survived all that stuff because we're here, right? Oh, so much for sharing that, Susie. Jason, did you have anything you wanted to share about what Susie was saying?
Yeah, that resonated with me on so many levels. It just really spoke, and like you said, Melanie, it was beautiful. It was just beautiful to hear the self-compassion in your story, Susie, because it's one of those things where change so often happens and we don't always realize it. We don't always see our own growth. And I think that's why sometimes we're our own worst enemies or our own worst critics, because we don't always recognize the steps that we've taken to get to where we're at today. So again, it kind of goes back to that hitting the pause button and just assessing where you're at instead of always being in rewind or always trying to hit fast forward. Just hitting pause and saying, hey, I'm at a much better part of my story right now than I was a year ago or 2 years ago. And one of the things, I'm huge into the power of storytelling and sharing your experience. But one of the things is our stories are always evolving. There's always a new opportunity for us to write a new chapter. There's no closed book on it. So to me, that's one of the cool things that comes about with change, is that we can just continue to evolve and change as time goes along.
Do you find, as you're, I mean, or does anyone find as we are growing, we are changing, we are stepping forward in our own recoveries, that the people, that the people around us do not see that, maybe they're scared of that, maybe they don't trust that. And so I feel like I'm also not only fighting my own old stories in my own head, but I'm also hearing a lot of people around me telling me that it's not true, that I am this way or that way. And so I'm also meeting a lot of external resistance that it also, I'm finding that very frustrating. It's happening to me a lot lately. It's like people telling me what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, how I'm, what I feel when I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, what my intentions are. And I'm just like, but no one's asking. No one's really asking or listening. And I wonder how that all kind of fits into this part of change. It's like I'm trying to move forward, but I'm finding it's very difficult. That's why it's important to have a really good team around of people that do see it and hear us.
Yeah, because I relate to that too, because there are people in my experience who still see the old Jason. They don't see, as I like to refer to it, Jason 2.0. And I think sometimes it just comes from uh, we like to label people. We like to make those stereotypes, unfortunately. And I think sometimes people just have that preconceived notion, and it's very difficult for them to see the changes, especially when you're going through the recovery and healing journey, because so many of the changes are happening on the inside that people can't see. So you feel them, you experience them every single day, but somebody on the outside might not always get that same experience.
Yeah, I like to say, I see you there, Caitlin. Give me 1 second. Consider that if you were to notice and like how your thoughts are and what you're paying attention to, our thoughts are very internally focused, right? Like, I don't know how many times throughout the day that I actually stop and think about someone else's experience or how something's affecting others. I think it's quite rare actually. And yet our thoughts are always like, what's that person thinking about me? So it's interesting that both of those things are happening at the same time. And so one thing that it's actually my therapist reminded me of is that whether that's, at this case, we were having a conversation about one of my parents, and that to Jason's point, like they have a history, an experience of us for a certain period of time that looks like this. And when that starts to change, there's like a bit of uncertainty there for them as well. Like, is this something that's new? Like, should I rely on this? Should I be leaning into it? And it causes a little bit of uncertainty and unsettling for them, and not knowing how to respond and not knowing what to say. And that whole part of like, we're in our own thoughts and experience, and commonly we're projecting our own experience on another person. So it's not to discount the experience, Susie. I think it's really important to acknowledge that that person may or may not be able to acknowledge what's happening for you, while also holding a little bit of compassion that like, hey, like I've got that you don't really get what's going on for me. There's lots of change going on for me, and I can see that you're not getting that with me yet. So being able to have a conversation where appropriate, where it feels safe, to say, hey, listen, like actually that's not what's going on for me, and I really want to share what is going on for me. Are you open to that? And being able to lean into it, when it feels safe to do so. Because when I've had some of those, I call them like, they're confronting. It's a bit of a confronting conversation. It's very vulnerable to say, actually, that's not what I'm thinking. And I'd love to share what I am thinking if you're open. It kind of gives that agency, that opportunity for that person. And that also, it's not my job to do that. It's not my responsibility to be able to move that person from where they are, or what they think about me currently, to where I'd like them to be. It's a choice. I get to create that change. So it's kind of like choosing to change the relationship when it feels safe to do so.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Caitlin, I saw you were going to say something.
Sure. Yeah. There's so many things that you've all said that resonates with me. Being autistic, I find change can be very difficult. I've had the last 3 weeks, I've had a bulldozer, not literally, but basically a hell of a lot going on in my life for the last 3 weeks, and it's only kind of ended on Friday. And it's kind of like trying to quiet those thoughts down and try not to judge yourself and beat yourself up for the mistakes you've made. And I find it very difficult to see in advance or in the future where I'm going to be. I'm trying to resist the negative thoughts. Yeah, sorry, there's so much going on and so much that's been said that I'm trying to think about how it impacts on my life. And I find it very challenging change, but I know that change is a way of growing, a way of bettering ourselves. And sometimes it can be exciting when you can see, oh, how much I've grown in the last year. I'm a totally different person to I was a year ago, but it's hard to see unless you got other people telling you that. So it's like growing your hair. You can't see your hair is actually growing until I kind of like, oh yeah, 4 years ago I was bald, because I literally was 4 years ago bald. And when I came out as trans, I shaved my head for 3 months, and then slowly it got longer and longer. So yeah, that's what I would like to add.
What a beautiful analogy, right? Like you're saying that, Jason, like when you're right in front of it, like we do see the changes as an everyday, like we're experiencing it, but we can also step over them, right? We can miss those changes, to Caitlin's point. So beautiful. And there's a comment in the chat box here too, that I think it can be nice, at least for me sometimes, to revisit things that I've done before, books, workshops, events, etc., that really allow me to see where I've changed or not. We are literally physiologically not the same person that we were when we started this event today, because our body is recreating cells. Like we are truly evolving in every single moment. So I love that idea, like going back to read something again to see, like, how do I see that now? Or how does that show up for me today? As a way to be checking back in and reminding the mind that we are a newly evolved, different human being, or we've obviously pulled something from the past into today that helps us see things differently.
Sometimes that makes me really sad when I go back and read my old journals and think, I haven't grown. I'm still saying the same things. I'm still doing the same things I wrote 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. That's when I take that effing journal and I put it in the garbage, because I'm just like so mad at myself. I have no compassion for myself at that place usually, that I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so exhausted with myself, because I know and I want that so badly, but I feel like my feet are nailed to the ground. It's like, I want that change, but I'm having so much trouble getting that foot unglued. It's like, yeah, so I'd love to talk about the changes we want, but don't seem to be able to put in place.
Yeah. I mean, Melanie will know I've been trying to get mental health support for my eating disorder for I've been trying to get into recovery for 4 years, and it's only been finally in March that they accepted for me to get an assessment, but it was kind of like an 8 to 10 month wait, and I'm still waiting. I'm still struggling to get that help, and wanting to change so badly, but don't know how to start it is a really difficult place to be in, because I can see the
Or even
changes within
knowing
my
all
body.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Or even knowing all the hows,
Yeah.
knowing all the how-tos, but
Yeah.
not putting them into action. So annoying.
I'll just add to this just for my own kind of personal experience. I thankfully right now, like I feel like I'm in a very good place with my recovery, but I also do know from years of having this, like there are ebbs and flows, and I could have a relapse again, who knows when. But I do feel like kind of being, I won't say on the other side of it, but still kind of in the throes of it. I think what really helped me change was taking my power back. I think looking back at the beginning steps of my recovery and when I was trying to get help and trying to get support, like I had so much of my like ability to recover and the ability to change in other people's hands, of like the dietitian, the treatment team, my psychologist. Like looking back at my emails, like I was thinking about it the other day of just like, wow, how much I didn't trust myself, of like relying on someone else to tell me how much to eat, and are you sure those amounts are right, and double check again, and are you really positive, and to be able to know that like I really wasn't able to change until I started being able to trust myself, which again, right, like to a sense is a privilege. Like it takes a long time to get there, especially when you're just at the beginning of your recovery. But I think for me, like it really did take like being scared and being willing to just like see it as a test of like, okay, if this really sucks and blows up, like I can go right back to my behaviors, whatever, like that's all there waiting. I know how to do those things, but like what might it be like if I took that power back and tried something different? So I think a lot of times, like thinking about change, like change is scary, regardless of if it's good or bad, right? Even if you get a promotion at work or whatever it is, like change is scary, regardless of what the change is. But like, you never know unless you try it. And we would tell the same thing to a kid, right? Like, just try it. Maybe you will like soccer, maybe you won't, who knows? But like the same goes for us. Like I think we have to try it sometimes in order to know like if it is worth it. But again, right, like easier said than done. But
Yeah,
at the end of the day, like it's up to us.
So good. Yeah.
but it's knowing it's knowing what road to go down, which is what I struggle with, because literally I am waiting for that help to start the road for recovery.
Thank you all for sharing so beautifully. Jason, anything you want to say before we transition into our practice?
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to touch upon is I know that there was some conversation around making that change happen, wanting that change, but actually making it happen. And it kind of goes back to what I said earlier on about that 5-year plan, where I was just taking it 5 minutes at a time instead and saying, I really want this change to happen. What can I do today? What is one small thing I can do in the next 5 minutes to get me a little bit farther down the road? And understand that it's not going to happen overnight, that I might not be at that place that I want to be at a year from now yet. But at least a year from now, I'm a little bit closer. I've put in that work that I've needed to do. So I think it's just that reminding myself that I want this. This is what I want. For so long, I listened to what my eating disorder wanted, and now I'm taking control of it, and I want this. And I think even just that simple reminder, that's a huge action right there. That's a huge step forward.
Beautifully said. Well, let's transition to a physical practice. And I'll share that my second computer has died. So I'm going to do the practice from my chair so that you all get to see me because there's no video over there. Welcome to live TV. So I'm going to cue this just for sitting in my chair. So you're welcome to join me in any way you want. As a reminder, you are not being recorded from video. So if you do feel comfortable having your video on, it can help me with cueing and sharing so I can see if you're in a seated position, I'll cue something seated. If you decide to lay down or stand up, I can cue to that. And I understand how challenging it is to have ourselves on video. So checking in with yourself there. So let's find a comfortable position to start in. Think about what feels like where you want to be. Do you want to be standing? So to what Jason was saying there so beautifully, check in with yourself of what I can do in these next 5 minutes in my practice. Where would I feel comfortable starting? Perhaps it's having something behind your back or your spine. Perhaps it's having something underneath your pelvis would support you. Perhaps you feel like you want some movement, you want to be standing or even laying down. And just give yourself a moment to check in. What do I want in the next 5 minutes? Who do I want to be with myself in the next 5 minutes? Not even the whole practice, just 5 minutes. So perhaps there's a word that you can use to describe how do I want to be with myself in these next 5 minutes? Do I want to be compassionate, curious? Do I want to be gentle? Do I want to be listening? Picking a word for you as a way of being, a way that you can explore the practice for the next 5 minutes. And then checking in with your breathing and not trying to make it a certain shape or a length, but curiously, how's my breath in this moment? Where do I notice it? How do I notice it? Am I noticing places where my breathing stops or starts? Am I noticing tension as my breath moves through a space? Am I noticing ease as my breath moves through a space? And perhaps you can begin to notice the length of your breath. Its flowing nature. It's a little repetitive in how it moves through you. See if you can find that pattern of the length of the inhale and the length of the exhale. Using that as an invitation to practice within your existing breath, its existing pattern, its existing length. And then take a moment to notice whatever you're sitting on. And if you happen to be standing, notice your feet touching the ground. And just notice the solidity of it. Even if you're in a chair that can wiggle a little bit, notice that it's there, supporting you. Notice gravity gently holding you to the planet. There's no effort needed to be grounded, to feel that space of safety in just where you are in this moment. And that even when, as we start to move here, I want you to keep bringing yourself back to how you're grounded, how you're being held to the earth. So I'm going to invite a little bit of movement here, and I'm going to give you a bit of an intention to play. So keeping that way of being that you were going to have. So where you're going to curiously play, gently play, compassionately play in your movement. And I invite you to play with the movement and notice that as you move through space, as you move your body, that you're still grounded. You could still feel your bum in the seat or your feet on the floor. So let's take an inhale breath, starting with our hands at heart center, inhaling our arms up overhead. Exhale, open them out to the side and bring them back down and towards heart center again. And taking that same breath a couple more times, moving at your own pace. Inhaling, use the whole inhale to come up and the whole exhale to come back to center. And just notice if that changes how you're seated. Does it change gravity holding you to earth in any way? Not looking for the right answer, but be curious. Let's bring our hands to heart center at the next stop for you in your breath. Reaching the right arm up and then lean to the left side. So you might notice again as you move here, and we'll take a couple breaths here. Notice how that changes the grounding in your seat. Perhaps you even want to press down that right butt muscle. Press it down towards the floor. Keep yourself grounded and supported. And then as you do that, let's inhale up to the top. Exhale back down to the side. Again, notice how it changes your grounding and you're still seated. Using your breath to move. If you want, you can even reach forward a little bit versus the side. Let yourself play here. Explore like a clock. Explore different places that you can take your arm to. Maybe it's forward. And notice no matter how much you're moving, you're still grounded. The next time you come up to the top, you can switch your arms up, taking the left side. So again, notice, perhaps even before you start moving, you want to ground that glute muscle so you can feel even more safe as you move. And if you're doing this standing, the same thing, notice the placement of your feet. Do you want them further apart? Do you want to press into the toe mounds and the ankle mounds? Letting yourself play with how you move. How do you support yourself and feel grounded? Your butt or your feet on the ground as you move through any direction you want to go. Perhaps you want to lean back a little bit. Does it change your ability to feel safe in your space? Bringing your arms back down the next time that you reach the top. Let's try that with both arms now, reaching them up towards the ceiling. Give a nice little stretch in the spine here. Again, notice button chair, feet on ground. And to do that same kind of play, and I invite you to really let yourself move in any which direction. Perhaps it's really flowy back side to side or very directional in where you want to go. Let yourself move around and play as much as you want. Maybe even challenging your seat. And you move in a way that you think, maybe I won't be able to stay in my seat if I move there. Can you find that playfulness and curiosity? And you notice your body adapting to support you, to keep you grounded. Let's reach up to the sky one more time. Get a nice big stretch here. And bring the hands down through heart center. Let's take a moment and just check in. Notice your breath again. Perhaps you've lost your intention. You can reconnect to it in this moment. Maybe it's changed too. Maybe there's a new intention you'd like to play in this 5 minutes. So yogi choice here, you can come to tabletop position, so hands and knees. You can stay in your chair if you want. I'm just going to move a bit forward in my chair, so I've got a bit of movement space. So again, notice the parts of your body that are grounded to the floor. So if you're on your hands and knees, perhaps you notice the palms of your hands, your knees and shins, the top of your foot grounded. Maybe give a little wiggle. Just kind of notice that sense of, okay, what part of my body is supporting me in this moment? Notice that no matter how much you might try, you could not fly. That gravity is supporting and holding you here. And then bring yourself back to your breath and begin to explore. So we're going to play a little bit. You can play with some cat-cow, some barrel rolls, just playing and moving in the spine. So I find when I'm seated, I like to like a little pawing forward, like almost like a cat. It's like pawing into the ground and playing with my spine in that way. Can even do some circles here and really play again with that movement. And notice how your own movement, whatever you choose, shifts your center of gravity and that gravity still exists. And then coming back to a place of neutral, whatever that feels like for you. Now let's play with a little bit of balancing here. So if you're seated, we're going to just play with opposite arms and legs. So we can lift the left leg and the right arm up off the ground. And if you're in your tabletop position, you can play with the same and not necessarily trying to get that to work. Let's switch sides. Notice if it feels comfortable to lift both. Maybe you want to just lift the leg or lift the arm using your breath for your guide of movement. Notice if your arm wants to come out further to the side or if it wants to be straight up. Considering how do you feel safe in your seat in this moment, whether that's hands and knees. Let's play a little bit more, playing with the legs coming out towards the side, arms out towards the side, back in towards center, out towards the side on the opposite side, back in towards center. And continue to notice how this challenge of our grounding is being experienced for you in this moment. Maybe you want to, if you're seated, you can even try both arms with your one leg, or both legs with one arm, or all four. Play with that. Notice, how do I care for myself being in this place of movement? And if you're in that tabletop position, even moving the leg out to the side and back, creating a bit more of a flow of movement, how do you adjust your knee, your body weight and placement to feel safe in this moment? It's almost like the body is designed here to counteract your movement. See if you can notice that. What's changing and shifting as you move through that position. And then finding a place of neutral when you feel ready. And finding a comfortable position, we'll do a little bit of meditation together. So if you'd like to, if you want to stay in your seat, I invite you to now sit back. So you've got that back rest, so you can relax towards the seat. If you want to lay down on the mat, whatever feels comfortable, we're going to place one hand above the belly button and one hand below the belly button. So for me right now, I'm feeling like I want to support my elbows. So see if you can even lean down in my chair a little bit so I can support my elbows and resting on the side rest. Or perhaps you wanted to have a blanket underneath your elbows, pillows, blocks, whatever you've got handy. And start by noticing the parts of your body that are touching the surface below you. Perhaps you notice your feet, the backs of your legs, your low spine, your head. Just notice what's supporting you. And maybe notice what it feels like to have your hands placed one above and one below the belly button. And you feel the weight of your hands leaning on your skin. Perhaps you're noticing the temperature of your hands. You notice any sensations. Without engaging them, do you notice any thoughts? And just allowing those to be present. Gently and progressively begin to direct your breath into the space below your hands. Allowing your breath to fully expand and fully exhale. Continuing to breathe fully and deeply. To bring your attention to any sensations you know below your hands. What do you notice? Is there gurgling or movement? Do you notice tightness, constriction? Is there tenderness or pain, achiness, numbness? Continuing to breathe fully and deeply into your hands, bringing your attention to any sensation you feel. Continuing to breathe fully and deeply. Ask yourself curiously, what need might the sensations be pointing to? What need might the sensations be pointing to? If you noticed an achiness or pain, perhaps there's a need for soothing or comfort. If you noticed a hollowness or an emptiness, perhaps there's a need for nourishment or soothing, comfort. If you noticed a tightness, perhaps there's a need for rest. Continuing to breathe fully and deeply. Curiously considering what needs the sensations you noticed might be pointing to. Continuing to breathe fully and deeply. Without having to change or fix or solve anything. Notice any reaction to the needs or the sensations you're having in this moment. Perhaps you're noticing yourself getting distracted, ruminating on a to-do list or thoughts. Perhaps there's judgment, a desire to deny the need, or some judgment about the need, perhaps that they're too much. Maybe today the reaction is acceptance and gratitude. Without needing to change, fix, or solve the reaction. Continue deeply breathing as you notice any reactions to the needs and sensations in your body in this moment. Continuing to breathe fully. Consider what action you can take in the next 5 minutes to an hour to meet the need showing up in your body right now. What action you can take in the next 5 minutes, within the next hour, to meet the need showing up in your body right now. If you notice a need for nourishment, perhaps a snack or a healthy meal. If you notice a need for connection, perhaps it's reaching out to a friend. Maybe you noticed a need for rest. You could take an early bed, a nap, or a pause in your day. Gently allowing the meditation to soften, coming back to the group at your own time. Welcome back, Jason. Oh, thank you for saying that, Miss Lovely Caitlin. I definitely do not want you to plunk to the floor, but I'm glad that you feel rested. Any final words for you, Jason, around navigating change?
Yeah, so to me, that practice just opened me up to curiosity. And I think that's one thing that can help when it comes to navigating change is to approach it from that curiosity, but know that there's always that opportunity to ground yourself. The gravity's always got you grounded. So, yeah, that's going to help me as I navigate some changes coming up over the fall and winter is just approach it with that curiosity.
Mm-hmm. My grandmother used to say, get curious, not furious.
Love it.
So
Sounds like a wise
yeah,
woman.
she really was. I call it like grandma wisdom, right? Yeah, I love that sense of when we can drop in and it's like less of a check-in, but more of like curious, like how am I experiencing this moment? What am I noticing? And we tend to like really drive into our thoughts and emotions. But even noticing our sensations, what's our body communicating? There's a little less mind chatter, a little less story being made up about our thoughts and emotions. It's really high there, but when we think about what's my body communicating, what sensations do I feel tense? Do I feel my breath rate increasing? We can take some more compassionate actions to care for our needs and let the thoughts and the emotions be there while we support ourselves. Well, I'd love to get a checkout. Let's in the chat box, 1 to 3, 4 words. What do you feel like in this moment? Let me do a curious check-in. And while you're doing that, I want to thank you all for being here. Jason, this has been so lovely. We'll have to do this again to be able to spend an hour with you. And I got to learn a little bit more about your story as well.
Yeah, absolutely. This was phenomenal. Thank you so much. One of the most powerful things I think that we have in our recovery journeys is community and connection. And that's what this last hour was all about is community and connection. So thank you everyone for showing up and joining us today.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I couldn't agree more. So you'll receive an email from me, as I mentioned, in the next day or so, and that will include information about how to get to the recording, etc. Thank you so much for being with us. I hope that you will sign up to join us again in November. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.